Well, I mentioned Mike Pence, so let's talk about Mike Pence for a second. I haven't watched the whole speech that he gave in New Hampshire about the difference between populism and conservatism, and I did not know that he was going to give that speech. I mean, I knew he was going to give a speech. I didn't know the substance of it when I wrote Wednesday's G file, which covered a considerable amount of the same territory. Now, the difference between us is that when he says conservatism isn't the same thing as populism, he's saying it awfully late. And I've been saying it for 20 years. And again, I've never, you know, I've never been like some purist on this, that you can't have any populism mixed in with conservatism or Republican politics or any of that kind of stuff. You know, this is a boisterous, exuberant country. I've been a broken record on this idea that all poisons are determined by the dose. So a little bit of populism, a little bit of orneriness, a little bit of, a little tax protest here, a little, civil rights protest there. That kind of stuff, I think, is part of a sort of a part of the healthy, diverse diet of civil society, and it's unavoidable, right? But my point has always been that populism, taken to its own logical conclusions or its own irrational, passionate conclusions, is in many ways the antithesis of conservatism, both capital C sort of ideological conservatism and small c, say, temperamental institutional conservatism, insofar as populism elevates passion over reason. It is inherently anti-intellectual. You've heard me do this shtick 1,000 times, so I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. Pence, made similar points, adjacent points, and as we talked about on the Dispatch podcast yesterday, which should be up now, I'm very sympathetic to Steve's point of view, insofar as it's always better when people who've been wrong people who've been saying wrong things start saying right things. People who had the wrong position move towards the right position. Now, of course, we think our positions on this kind of stuff are right. Otherwise, as Ramesh would say, they wouldn't be our positions. And I think a lot of listeners know what I mean. Is like if you've been supporting irresponsible, at times dangerous trends in American politics, and you stop, that's good, and you shouldn't be condemned for it. And there are a lot of people for whom the temptation to say, now you're saying this, right? After you rode the Trump train for a really long time, and you're not doing well in the polls now, and all of a sudden it feels more like a desperation play than some sort of cry from the heart of conviction. Again, you don't have to be purist on this kind of thing. In politics, it's often a desperation play to actually start telling the truth, right? It is often a sign of you've got nothing left to lose, so you might as well speak with conviction. And I'm not trying to be overly harsh on Pence. I think Kevin was a little too hard on him in his thing, and we'll have that debate anon. Or soon. Does anon mean soon? I can't remember. Anyway, it just feels so. Like, this gets at this sort of inherent tension, right, of between substantive analysis, substantive political analysis, which is a little different than substantive sort of philosophical, or I don't know, analysis on the merits of people's positions. So, like, on the merits, I think Pence is right in the things that he's saying about how conservatism and populism aren't the same thing. That Donald Trump, the conservative movement and the Republican Party didn't start the day Donald Trump came down the escalator, all those kinds of things. I'm glad to hear him say it. I don't know that it's going to do a lot of good. So, like on the substance, on the philosophical substance, or on the analytical substance, I think he is largely right and correct. Um, as a matter of the sort of the punditry or political analysis, or the meta analysis of where all this works, is like, don't it's not going to work out for him. I don't think it's going to ignite a movement around him. I am not convinced that a different candidate than Mike Pence couldn't garner more support for this kind of message. I'm not convinced that, say, Nikki Haley couldn't sort of make the spirited defense of pre-Trump Reaganism and it would work for her. Not because she would be a more authentic salesperson of that message. Pence is about as authentic a salesperson of that message as you're going to get in this field, given his true love and devotion to all things Reagan. But simply because Nikki Haley's a more charismatic personality, you know. And what is it Samuel L. Jackson says, you know, about what's his face, the pig, and in Pulp Fiction, you know, personality goes a long way. Personality matters more than I would like, but it does, you know. And Pence's personality, I think there's just something not inspiring about his always more in sorrow than in anger. You know, he's sort of like a very upstanding president of a Christian university who has to go, you know, walk in and chastise students for getting too raucous. That sort of tone, I just don't think plays really well. And it plays particularly poorly given that he was Donald Trump's wingman for so long. So I think, you know, I mean, I wish that the substance of messages was all that really had influence and power in American politics or in politics in general. It just doesn't, you know. I mean, there is no substance to 90% of the stuff that Trump says, and his biggest fans don't care. The substance in Vivek Ramaswamy's stuff is just self-contradicting garbage, but he's getting a following. It's the nature of politics. And so I'm glad that Pence is saying this stuff. I wish he had said it earlier. I wish he had realized it earlier. You know, on this topic of populism is a problem for the right. I have just an enormous sack of I told you so's I could be pulling out anytime I wanted, and never using the same one twice, about how often and how many times and in how many different ways I've said this stuff. So I just have very mixed feelings about this. I did see this.